Good evening and welcome to our midweek devotion for December 15th, 2021. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to take a moment to announce that in response to the recent storms that happened in South that happened in Kentucky, specifically Kentucky. They happened in several states, but the church here at Shepherd of the Hills is giving to the Indiana Kentucky Synods drive to raise money to help those in Kentucky however they may need it. And this Sunday, if you're going to be attending Shepherd of the Hills, we will uh, take a special collection in addition to what the church has already decided at council last night that we would give um, to send down to help our brothers and sisters just across the river who are in a lot of need after some very violent storms passed through their area. So if you're going to be here at Shepherd of the Hills this Sunday and you would like to give, feel free to do so. Just mark somewhere on your offering for tornado relief donations, and we will make sure those get to the right spot. If you're not going to be here and you would still like to give, you can check out our Facebook page, Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, and I will post the links there to both help support our brothers and sisters in Kentucky, as well as the one for the Lutheran Disaster Relief Group, and that would go more generally over the 5 affected states. With that being said, I want to take a moment this week as we draw closer to Christmas and talk about a hymn that is a major part of one of my favorite historical stories. World War I was a very, very important turning point in human history. A war like this had never been fought before. There were little skirmishes here and there, little wars between neighbors, but not one that had really brought most of the world together to fight in the way that World War I did. I'm sure many of you have probably heard of the stories of the Christmas truce that happened that first year of the war. Many who were fighting thought the war would be over by Christmas and they would be back home with their families. And yet, on December 24th, there they were in the muddy, smelly trenches. And on the other side of no man's land, the enemy in their own muddy, smelly trenches. What happened that night was so incredible because it showed what can happen when a new reality bursts into the current one. You see, up until that day, there had been so much fighting and artillery shelling and charges across no man land. And then suddenly ceasefires started taking place. Sides started shouting between one another. In some places, even shouting, "Tomorrow, Christmas Day, if you don't shoot at us, we won't shoot at you." And in one place, the story, and this is one of my favorites, both sides sitting in their trenches as night fell. The German side started to put up lit Tannenbaum, lit Christmas trees. And they started to sing in the midst of the war, the fighting, all the death and bloodshed. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. And the other side heard the singing. And they didn't respond the way you would think soldiers would respond. They didn't try drowning out the singing with gunfire or artillery or charges or anything. What they did, and I love this, they started singing back. They started a contest with the Germans to see who could sing a carol louder. And in the end, they ended up all singing together and singing, I believe it was Auld Lang Syne, as one people. as humans gathered together at the holidays. This song we sing every year, usually at Christmas Eve when we light candles near the end of our service, when the only light is the candlelight in the sanctuary. This song describes this picturesque scene, a silent night when the world is asleep and Christ is born. A new reality comes forth in the midst of everything else going on. When Christ was born, Mary and Joseph had traveled a great distance to Bethlehem, as many others did, in the middle of a census. The town was so crowded, there was nowhere but this stable for them to even stay the night, let alone to have a child. And yet, in the midst of all of this noise, in the midst of all the violence that took place, in the midst of the busy crowdedness of the city of Bethlehem at this time, Christ is born. A new reality breaks through the loud busyness of life and offers something new, offers a peace that goes beyond what we humans can understand, and that is the peace that God can give us. In the midst of all that's going on in the world, right now, there's a lot. Being so close to the Ohio River here in Evansville, we're mere miles from the destruction of the storms. We are so close to all that pain. And in our own community here, our numbers have risen once again. There's lots of questions about the future. And in the midst of all this noise, all the weight of that questioning, of that sadness, Christ enters in. The joy that we may not be feeling at this moment enters in. And a new reality is born. It takes place right in our midst to bring us a peace that we could not fully comprehend, one that's given to us by Christ. It's a peace that comes from knowing that our Savior, the one who would set us free, has arrived. Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. It's a beautiful hymn with some amazing history, and it reminds us that even in the midst of the loud noisiness of the world, in the midst of it all, there is a silent, sweet peace that comes when our Savior is born. Thank you for joining me this week. I know it was a little bit longer of a devotion, but there's a little more to talk about. I look forward to seeing you all next week. If you would like to join us for Christmas Eve, that will be Christmas Eve, Friday the 24th, at 7 o'clock here at Shepherd of the Hills. Masks are mandatory if you join us in person, but we would love to have you with us. If not, it will be recorded and be online later that evening on our YouTube and Facebook pages respectively. And if I don't see you before then, have a Merry Christmas. God bless.